Hey After Effects user, does looking at a lot of layers leave you livid? Are you constantly clicking on stroke width when you wanted to choose scale? Does opening timeline twirlies give you tribulations? Then you need the all-new Properties panel. It adjusts, it animates, it's contextual. Hey, Kyle Hamrick here for School of Motion. And as that super helpful announcer just said, today we're looking at the new Properties panel in After Effects. You're likely already familiar with this panel if you use Photoshop, Illustrator, or InDesign. It's intended to be a one-stop shop that displays everything you might want to adjust about a selected layer or object. In After Effects in particular, where you've got complex layers that can take up an entire screen by themselves, having one spot to quickly view and adjust relevant properties can save you a lot of hassle scrolling through the timeline. All right, let's dive in. I feel like this panel is pretty straightforward once you see how it works, but let's take a look, see what it can do. The most obvious thing you're going to find here are the basic layer transform properties, which will be here for any layer you select. These properties make up the majority of animation even in really complex projects, so having easy access to them without having to open anything or take up more space in the timeline is really handy. You can adjust any of these properties right up here, and if you want to animate, just click the stopwatch icon. It'll create a keyframe on that property for you and expose that new keyframe down in the timeline. You can jump to another spot in the timeline by taking advantage of shortcuts like Page Up, Page Down, Shift Page Up, or Shift Page Down, or Home and End. You can also use these little arrow icons to jump to the previous or next visible keyframe. Or of course, you can also do that with the J and K keys. For simple projects, you might be able to do most of your animation without ever leaving the Properties panel. If you have multiple layers selected, you'll get the same behavior. Adjust them both, or click the stopwatch to enable animation for this property on both layers. If you right-click on any of these properties, you'll get a menu with a few more helpful options, depending on which property you're working with. You'll also have these same controls available on 3D layers, including cameras and lights. That's all pretty helpful already, but the denser layer types like text and shape layers are where this panel really starts to shine. Even a simple shape layer with one shape can take up almost your entire screen without even exposing every property. The Properties panel really helps condense this by showing you the layer transforms like before, plus the shape layer contents, plus adjustments for your parametric shapes, strokes, and fills, and then you even have access to transform the individual shape groups right in here as well. So if you've added multiple elements onto a single shape layer, you can easily navigate all of that right here. As with layers, you can also select and adjust multiple groups at the same time, which is really handy for something like updating multiple colors. Unfortunately, the Properties panel doesn't currently display all the great operators you can add within shape layers like trim paths or repeaters. So all of that still needs to be added and adjusted down in the timeline. For now. Hopefully that's on Adobe's roadmap sometime soon, but this should already make shape layers way more approachable and easier to work with. This panel is also great for working with my other favorite kind of super dense layer, text. Selecting any text layer will bring up those good old layer transforms again, plus the character and paragraph controls. Honestly, this is one place I really love this Properties panel, because with maybe a few exceptions, you could probably just say goodbye to the standalone character and paragraph panels. By default, you'll see a condensed version of the properties, but you can click More to see everything. Some properties, like additional stroke options, aren't visible until you actually have a stroke on your text, which makes sense as a way to save space. We actually got one new control in here, the ability to control the way it handles stroke corners, which is great to see. I will point out that the faux bold and faux italic styles aren't immediately available here in the panel, but you can find them up here in the hamburger menu. The paragraph area is pretty much the same, left, center, right, indentations, yada yada. But there is one really great addition here. We now have a little button to easily swap between point text or a text box. This used to be hidden away in a hard-to-find right-click menu, so it's awesome that they made this more discoverable. If you know me at all, you know I love text animators. The Properties panel helps you get started with them, though currently you still have to do all the actual work down in the timeline. This Add Animator button essentially just gives you immediate access to the same flyout menu you'll find within the text layer, where you choose which property you want to animate. Currently, the panel can't do any more than that, so the rest of this still needs to be twirled open and done down in the timeline. This does have the same functionality as that flyout menu though. If you have an existing animator selected, it will add any additional property you choose into that same animator. If you have any other part of the layer selected, it'll add a new animator for that property, separate from any existing ones. In another recent video, I outlined all the ways you could be using a feature called Essential Properties to work more efficiently inside After Effects. I'd suggest you watch that video to get a better understanding of what they can do, but here's the short version. If you add a property to the Essential Graphics panel, that property will now be visible when this composition is nested into another composition, and you can change or even animate the property without having to go back into that original composition. I'm happy to report that you can add properties to Essential Graphics directly from the Properties panel, from that right-click menu I pointed out before. And for any pre-composition with Essential Properties, those will be visible and changeable in the Properties panel. You also get access to the push and pull features if you want to revert to the original value or push this into your pre-comp to make it into the default. Changing Essential Properties text here is definitely easier than changing it down in the timeline, which is another one of those things kind of inconveniently hidden behind a right click. I've obviously only added a few properties here, but you can make really complex rigs using this feature, so being able to easily see everything in one place like this is really nice. This panel is now fully released as you're watching this, but you might have noticed I've been recording this in the beta version of After Effects. If you're interested in testing out new features and giving Adobe feedback on them before they're put into the public version, you can download the beta yourself in the Creative Cloud app by clicking on the speaker icon where it says Beta Apps. The Properties panel has actually been available in beta for over a year, which means there's been a ton of time for users to give feedback and help the development team learn what features this panel really needs to include. User feedback really does help the team, and it helps make sure the features work the way you want them to. In addition to some of the things I already mentioned, there are a few capabilities I'd personally like to see added into this Properties panel. At the time of this recording, you can create expressions by alt-clicking a stopwatch in the Properties panel, but property pick whips can't access anything in here. Layer styles are pretty hidden and kind of hard to find, and it seems like it would make a ton of sense to include these in a contextual panel like this. And while making this tutorial, I actually started wondering about whether it would make sense to just merge the Effect Controls panel into here someday. So if you're like me and you have ideas on ways this panel could be improved to be even more useful, make sure to let the team know what you want. Anytime you're in After Effects, just go up here to Help, Provide Feedback. And it'll take you right to the forums where you can ask questions or request new features and functionality. I hope you're excited to try out the Properties panel, and I hope it makes using After Effects a little easier for you. If you enjoyed what you just saw, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and head over to schoolofmotion.com to learn more about our interactive online curriculum. Let our team know if you have any questions at all. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.